Now let's engage in a very exciting subject called the art of persuasion. Let me give you some notes to take, because I found there's a great deal of difference between presentation and persuasion. When I first got into sales, I became a pretty good presenter. Show taught me well. I used to hear people say, I've listened to a lot of salesmen, but you've got to be one of the best. I thought, wow, the man has taught me well. Somebody else would say, hey, I've been around, I think I've heard them all, but wow, you've got to be the best. You're one of the greatest salesmen I've ever heard. And I thought, wow, I've learned this stuff pretty quickly. Then one day the awful truth dawned on me. I thought, hey, wait a minute. Something's wrong here. If I'm one of the world's all-time great salesmen, how come they ain't buying? It started to dawn on me that I had an additional skill to learn. I got very good at presentation. I had yet to get good at persuasion. There were two great orators of antiquity. One was Demosthenes. He was a Greek. The other was Cicero. Cicero was a Roman. And they were both great speakers. But it was said of Cicero, when he spoke, everybody said, what a great speech. It was said of Demosthenes, when he spoke, everybody said, let us march. And that's the difference between presentation and persuasion. I'm asking you to learn this additional skill. We call you a good persuader if now the results start to follow. If something starts to happen, if people decide, if they actually do something about your presentation, if they do something about your appeal, if something happens, now we know you have truly become what we call a persuader. So let's talk about the art of persuasion and what all it entails. Let me give it to you. Here's number one. Be a good storyteller. If you're involved in a company that deals in numbers and business and products and volume of business, make sure you translate all the business into stories. Sometimes it's easy to say, we did $10 million in business last month. And then we forget the stories that are involved in that 10 million. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Become story conscious as well as figure conscious. How many stories does $10 million represent? And if you're only interested in the numbers and not the stories, you'll be limited in your future skills of communication. Try to translate activity and business and volume and money and numbers into people's lives and stories and who all is involved in the transactions. Okay? Now here's another key. Become your own best storyteller. Learn to tell your own story. Whether it's identification, logic, solutions. Be a student of your own life. It's so important to go back over your own life. It's good to review at the end of the day your experiences of the day. We call it learning to reflect. One of the keys of making the past more valuable to invest it in the future is learning how to reflect. And let me give you some good times to reflect. One is at the end of the day. Take a few minutes at the end of the day and go back over your day. Who did you see and who did you meet and who did you talk to and what happened? Why did they say what they said and why did you say what you said? We call it running the tapes again. And if you'll take a few minutes at the end of the day and run the tapes of the day again, that day will take a more important place in your equity future. You'll be able to draw from that day. But if you casually go through the day, and then if you casually miss the opportunity to lock that day into your consciousness, sure enough, at some future time when you could have drawn from that experience, it won't be available. Here's how to lock in your past and make it more of an equity. Number two. Take a few hours at the end of the week to go back over a week. A week is a pretty good chunk of time. The sights and the sounds and the colors and the people and the decisions and the mistakes and the errors and the successes. Just go back and review that week and let that week take a more powerful place in your awareness. A half a day at the end of the month. A month is really a good chunk of time. We wouldn't let a company go by without taking a look at least in 30 days. You can't be casual about taking a look. Somebody says, well, let's let the company go a few years and then we'll take a look. Say, no, you can't wait a few years. That would be too late. You could be so far off track. Now, I'm asking you not to let your life go more than about 30 days without taking a serious look at the numbers and what you've done and what you've said and how you've grown and your experiences so that one more 30-day period takes a stronger place in your life. Take a weekend at the end of the year called Time to Reflect. Why? To make the past more valuable. If you treat it so, experiences can become commodity. currency, coin. Now, why try to make the past more valuable? Here's the simple answer: to invest it in the future. Let me offer you this challenge: to gather up more of your past and invest it in your future. And part of it is studying your own story, because your own story could be so powerful in identifying and offering answers and solutions. No telling what, if you took a little time, you could uncover that you just haven't talked about for a long time. If you were to dig back, no telling what additional stories and experiences you could reawaken, so that when the opportunity came, you could draw from that experience and invest it into that conversation, and no telling who you could touch. And without it, it might be a touch you couldn't make and a reach for which you're too short. Stories, your story, other people's stories. What a great way to illustrate fact and ideas and philosophy is to use the stories of life, because that's the real stuff of life, the stories of life. All right, here's number 2 in the art of persuasion. Accurate facts. Accurate facts. We call it dealing in truth. Accuracy is very important. Here's why. It builds credibility. Credibility starts to weaken if you mess with the facts, the truth, the correct numbers.